Hey, thanks for stopping by.
So, how was your holidays?
Holidays were great. I went to North Carolina to visit some family, and then I was at home for the actual day of Christmas, which was really nice. I feel like I had a crazy year and I just needed a little rest. What about you?
For me, yeah, Christmas was at home. It was a chill Christmas, and then New Year's this past week, I went into Manhattan. I went to like this little masquerade type event. It was chill. Had a good
Oh,
time. Trying to get out more.
yeah. Wait, what kind of event was it? Was it like a party or something?
Yeah, it was like some New Year's thing. So at Comic-Con, there's this thing that did like an after party or whatever, this company. And so I went to that after party. Then I found that they hosted a Halloween party and they also hosted like a New Year's thing. So I'm like, sure, I'm trying to go out and act, not just be in my room reading comics. Let's see what this is. So I went to that. It was a good time.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I actually went to a masquerade party for Halloween. It was a
Ooh.
murder mystery theme. So as we walked in, they assigned every single person a character to play during the party. And then they gave you an envelope, and in the envelope, each card had directions for each round. And it was really interesting. And I had my little masquerade mask. I feel like when people have a mask on, it is literally like a cover for them, and then a different personality comes out. So it was a fun night.
Yeah, I had a Doctor Doom mask on, so like nobody knew what I looked like, and that was very chill. Speaking of family get-togethers and metal masks, because I don't have a good segue into the intro, um, Vision. So I'll do the intro script that, as I've said multiple times now, I still don't have it memorized. So hello there, and thank you so much for visiting your local comic shop. I'm Sean, and today Guneet has stopped by to talk The Vision. If this is your first time listening or watching, visiting your local Comic Sean is a podcast where we normally talk comics in a book club style format. The titles guests and I are reading can be found on my socials at local Comic Sean well ahead of new episodes discussing them. And new episodes drop every Monday at midnight. First episode coming out January 6th after we're recording this, so hopefully it all went well. For audio listeners, this podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. For those who prefer video, the podcast can also be found on YouTube. Please feel free to follow or subscribe on your platforms of choice. If you like the show and want to support it, I encourage you to subscribe to our Patreon. Subscribing gives you the opportunity to see behind the scenes content, learn how the podcast gets made, and or gain access to resources for both reading and digital creation. Thank you to all who subscribe to the show in any way, shape, or form. I truly appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get started and talk The Vision.
What a great intro. I'm sold. I'm about to subscribe to your Patreon.
Wow, wow. Thank you. So Ganeet, obviously I know you already, but my opening question is for you to talk a little bit about yourself. So, how familiar are you with comics, the Marvel, DC universes, etc.?
I am not very familiar. Actually, my only experiences with comic books have been with you. If you recall, last year you took me to Midtown Comics and you got me this.
Nightwing by Tom Taylor
Oh,
and Bruno
yep.
Redondo.
Yes, I have it, and I have the little plastic wrap it came in as well. So this was my first comic book experience, and I was so mesmerized by the images. Like that's something I always find impressive about comic books is the level of detail that goes into every single picture that you see. And our series today, Vision, it's my first full series that I have read all the way through. And Vision is a character that I really loved. I watched all of WandaVision, and that was actually my first experience in that universe. And I remember when I was watching it, I was asking other people who are way more familiar to explain things to me because I did not know. But I really loved the character of Vision, so I was excited to read this series with you.
So now, did you watch any like MCU projects with Vision before WandaVision, or mostly just
Oh, I
jumped into the show?
didn't. Just jumped right into the show.
Okay, so then there were definitely a lot of questions being like, what's the deal here? How he's an android? What's happening? Yeah, because he got introduced. Did you go back and watch any MCU projects like Avengers Age of Ultron or anything?
I didn't, but
Okay.
that is a great idea. I feel like after reading the whole series, and like seeing all the other Avengers mentioned at different points, I feel like I need to go back and like really hear their stories now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this book was really good. So this book is written by Tom King with art by Gabriel Hernandez Walta. And they had a guest artist on issue 7. And then colors by Jordie Bellaire, letters by Clayton Cowles, and just really good book. So bit of context and background on Tom King. This from what I understand, is like his main Marvel book before he switched over to DC, and he wrote Batman for 85 issues, and he's done a bunch of limited series. So he did a Batman Catwoman series. He did Rorschach, which is like a spinoff of Watchmen. He also did Danger Street. He's done a lot of like 12 issue limited series like this. And he's someone who kind of plans everything out, writes everything out in one go. This way, everything ties back by the end. It's not like any threads got lost. So he really does a great job at giving you this one concise picture by the end of the book. And now he's currently writing the ongoing Wonder Woman series where he's introduced Diana, now has a daughter, and he tends to do a lot of like big, shifts of things you've never seen before. And that's kind of where this book gets into with the Vision having a family for the first time. And the
Oh,
book was published between 2015 and 2016. Um, and after reading this, I would assume that a lot was pulled, or at least the inspiration was pulled from this book for WandaVision, because local suburban town, having a family, and I guess this is where they got the name for the dog in WandaVision, Sparky, because the dog's name was Sparky. And it was fan voted, which was pretty cool. I love when they do stuff like that. They did that for Nightwing, the book you have with the three-legged dog, Haley. They let fans name that dog too.
I
So,
love
what'd you think of the book?
well, actually, first question for you. So you mentioned it's a limited series, so most other series are more than 12 issues.
So yeah, so your standard comics, it depends on what you're reading, but like there's what's called ongoing series where like the book just keeps going until they decided to cut it off and restart it from number one. So like Spider-Man, it's technically on issue like past 900 at this point because it started publishing in the 60s, but they'll relaunch it at like, oh, to get more new readers involved, we're gonna relaunch it at number one. So it's legacy number 906, but it's actually only issue like 9 of this current run, etc. Um, so that's
Oh,
like your ongoing series, but then they'll do mini series, which for Marvel, it's typically like 5 issues. For DC, they tend to average around 6 issues. And then they do limited series, which are roughly on average like 12 issues, sometimes a little shorter at around 10 or 8. But especially in Tom King's case, a lot of them are like it's either a 6 issue miniseries or it's a 12 issue limited series.
got it. That makes sense. So you asked my thoughts on the book. I really enjoyed it, actually. I didn't realize that comics could get so dramatic and have all these twists and turns that just come out of nowhere. Like there were a few issues where I was like, wait, what just happened? And I had to like immediately rush into the next one to fully understand what I just read. But I actually really find myself drawn to Vision as a character. I think I just like characters that are kind of like this fish out of water underdog that you are rooting for. And so before I started reading this, I had just seen the Wicked movie. So I went into this with this lens of those characters. And so in my head, I was comparing, I don't know if you've seen the movie.
I did
Um,
not see Wicked.
are you
It's
familiar with the
I'm
story?
familiar with the plot, not well, but I just know it's like the prequel-ish to Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, so I was comparing that character of Elphaba, that green witch, with Vision, because in that movie, there's a lot of similar themes of people just assuming that she's bad because of where she came from. And then it's almost like, in a way, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, 'cause I know we have a lot to discuss. But with the ending, something I appreciated was that Vision almost became this thing that everybody was saying about him, and then at the last minute, he wasn't, and he was able to stand in his integrity. So Yeah, I think the characters were fleshed out super well. Just for background for listeners, I work in TV, so this type of storytelling is very up my alley, and I love the fact that even in like 12 issues that were like 20 around 22 pages each, the characters were all very complex. So hats off to that writer.
Oh yeah, Tom King, he's phenomenal. And so usually we've given like a little bit of a play-by-play of the book, but it's always droned on a lot. So, and I don't want to like give every little detail of this book away because it really is something stunning and incredible in my opinion after reading it. So just to give like a brief like play-by-play synopsis, pretty much the premise of this book is Vision creates a wife and two children for himself to have a family. They move to Virginia, where Vision starts working in the White House while still working with the Avengers, while his two kids are going to school, and his wife is kind of like a stay-at-home mom, but she's looking to get work in the town. And it really goes down a bit of like a sci-fi horror route where it's like that common fear of like what happens if machines make machines and what can go wrong with those things. And like you said, then you have the public perception where like there's that part in the at the beginning of the book where it says some people would want to take photos with the Vision and his family because like he's a hero and they want to post it on their socials. Other people would just take photos of the Vision and his family to put on their socials. And that was like a really like, yeah, that's kind of creepy and everything. And so they start to just have a normal life. That's all Vision wants for his family is a normal life to be like humans, but people aren't willing to accept them as humans, and then things start to go wrong because of how hard they're trying to be close to humanity. So, what did you especially like about the book?
Yeah. Okay, so going into specifics, there was some great dialogue I have to call out. So, actually, I want to bring up a line in WandaVision that I still think about years later, which is, what is grief if not love persisting? And this comic series had a line that like hit that deep for me when it was going into how Vision created his wife and how he had used part of the Scarlet Witch to create her. So, something that she had said to Vision, the Scarlet Witch, was about at the time when she had introduced the idea of Vision making a wife, she had said, I'm going to paraphrase here, but um, basically how this person would be like her, but she would be better for him because they understand each other very deeply. And I feel like I need to find the exact line because I'm butchering it right now. But I love that idea. And I applied that to my own life where it's like sometimes you meet people and you're like, you're really great. We're not meant to be together. But if I could meet someone like you in the future, that doesn't have X, Y, and Z, then that would be perfect. So I really like how this comic hits on hard truths in life. And I also really related to the character of his daughter because, she has a crush on this guy, and it's like very, very awkward, 16 years old in high school, and he tells her that she's cool, and then she's thinking about it for like the whole rest of the series. And I feel like this series really captured um all of the characters' internal struggles. So like with the daughter character, there was this struggle between wanting to be a normal teenager, but obviously she's not that way. And then with the mother character. Like I have to say the female characters in this were very fleshed out, which I appreciate. That's always a critique I have sometimes of stories is what is happening to the female characters here. So even with the wife, her whole struggle of, because she was made as part of the Scarlet Witch, she has access to memories and thoughts that aren't hers. And so this undercurrent of always feeling like you're second, and then her going through her own issues, not wanting to stress out her husband, and then at the end doing something that was completely self-sacrificing for him, I thought was really beautiful. And then, of course, with the son, that's actually something I wish we had gotten a little bit more of, was more of the son's struggles outside of the immediate family conflicts, because I felt like all of his moments were always like a reaction to what other people in the family were doing. But I would have loved to see a little bit more of him as a character. And of course, I love Sparky. Very sad about the neighbor's dogs, though, to be honest. There were parts of this series that were a little bit more gory and bloody than I expected,
Same.
but yeah,
Typically, like I was thinking this book would be in TV terms like TV 14, but then
yeah,
there's some parts I'm like, nah, this is TVMA. This is a
yeah.
bit more
I'm like,
mature.
ooh, like there's a lot of blood that you just drew here. I should not be
The
reading this
animal deaths got
again.
me. We lost a cat or a magic cat. We lost a dog. We then lost a robot dog. I was like, oof, we're we're losing a lot of folks here.
Really sad. But yeah, what did you like about the series?
Oh, I loved it. Same with you. The dialogue really got me. I really liked, and so I was on the phone last night with Alex. We were catching up as I was reading this, and I had to read him aloud one part because a big thing with this book is like it's to show a family and like how they go through family struggles, but they're all androids. And so I really loved how the dialogue was written to be like regular family conversations, but in the android way of speaking. And so there's this one page where Vision's fighting Giganto, which I believe was introduced in Fantastic Four. And so it's basically that conversation you'd have with your partner, being like, "Hey, babe, do you remember that we have this thing tonight?" And it's like, "What are you talking about? I didn't realize this is happening." It's like, "Well, hold on. I told you about it 3 times now. It's on our calendar. Like, how could you forget?" And everything. And that's like a common conversation, I feel like, with couples. And then just the way it's presented in the book, where it's, but given the circumstances, could you not provide such support? And then her response, I set this dinner with the headhunter on Saturday. I posted the appointment on our shared drive. I checked this morning. You have accessed that data on 3 separate occasions. And then Vision's response is like, yes, and though your tone and level of detail implies denial, I am in fact acknowledging those circumstances. All I am inquiring into now is if it is not too late for you to reschedule. And it literally, it's just that conversation of like, babe, we talked about this. We have to go to this thing. It's happening tonight. And it's like, but just the way they say it, it's on our shared drive and you have accessed this data. That's like their way of saying, you know this. Like we talked about this. I found all of that stuff like awesome, especially the way that it happened with, I think, pretty much everyone in the family at one point, but it mainly happened with Virginia, Vision's wife, and the mom, where when she starts like glitching, or I guess, something's going on just because of the stress and the traumas that they've been dealing with, how like the words just start repeating, like you can kind of hear like a computer glitching, where it's like, we've had this discussion, discussion, discussion. Like that really came through for me, and I really just picture that glitching where like even maybe the head's jolting a little bit as she's saying it. I thought all of that, the dialogue and how it was written, like Tom King's really good with dialogue. Sometimes I know some folks joke about it in like his Batman run, where like he does a lot of ellipses to show pauses in speech, but here he really does like the android robot, like how would they talk? And I thought that was really well done. That was one of my favorite
Yeah,
parts
I
of
love
the
that
series.
too. There was this one other part when Virginia enters the daughter's bedroom and she's like in classic teenage fashion, like, why are you just barging in? We talked about this, and why don't you just check his location if you're so worried about the son? And then the mom's like, I already did that. Why else would I have come in here? Just like their sassy tone with each other, but also having it written exactly in android speech was really strong. I wonder how long it took him to create this whole series and to go through everything. You were saying how he writes it in
He
one
he
run.
typic some from what I understand, from what I've heard, he writes things and like he writes the complete script before it gets drawn. This way, like he can make sure everything ties back together. And he definitely had to do a lot of research, or at least going back to things he read growing up, because he talked about how like in the first issue at the end in like the letters section, he talked about how he kind of wrote this from his perspective of like, it's always like a little weird to be a comic fan. Because you're not, it's like a little bit of a not taboo, but like not a common thing that everybody reads. And so he wrote this to be like an outsider's perspective on family. And there's that one issue where he goes over Vision because Vision has a great line. If I were to say my favorite piece of dialogue in the book, it'd be when Vision's talking to the principal after his son gets in trouble for basically choking out another kid because he got upset with him. And Vision drops this line of, I have saved this world 37 times. Every breath you take 37 times over is because of me. So you're going to do the right thing. You're going to suspend my kid because you're going to treat him like everybody else. And there's that one issue where they dive into like the 37 times that Vision regards himself as directly saving the world. And for Tom King to basically recite each of those things, I was like, okay, so he definitely dove very deep into the history of this character in the comics in order to tell some of these things, especially for what was then issue 7, where it kind of goes over his history with Scarlet Witch, with Wanda, and like it covers a lot of like, what led them to get here, that they're not together anymore. Um, and especially, they cover that one part where different from the MCU, in the comics, so Wanda makes her kids with her powers. But unlike the MCU where it just kind of happens, in the comics, it has to do more with like Marvel's Devil, Mephisto, where she kind of like stole those souls from hell to make her kids or whatever. So they weren't real, which is why you have that whole heart to heart with Vision of like the our children aren't real. We need to talk about this. And she gets upset, being like, well, if you're basically the equivalent of a toaster, why can't they be real just because they were created differently type deal. And so there's that one part where she's kind of glazed over and Vision's just talking to her because that was the time that they were erasing her mind because they were basically erasing her kids from existing. And so that's why after that point, Wanda has like a few mental breaks in comics where there's one where in Avengers Disassembled, she snaps because she finds out that her kids were erased and her friends erased her memory of them. So she snaps and basically orchestrates reality to kill some members of the Avengers and attack them. And then later, another big story is House of M, where she snaps again because of how she's been manipulated by her father and other events, with Magneto and the mutants to say no more mutants, and she basically wipes the majority of mutants from the face of the earth. So, reading with that in mind, reading the book, when she goes, "Hi, just so you know, I encoded my brainwaves into this gem for you to use for a wife one day." My immediate thought was, I don't know if that's gonna go well.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's great context to know.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And I'm even comparing it to things in WandaVision now. Um, yeah, I feel like if you're somebody who has followed the story closely, that foreshadowing is something that is like is gonna keep you on the edge of your seat. I feel like I need to go back and read that part again now, knowing this context.
Yeah, because it was like then when you're seeing Virginia, what's the first thing she does? So first they get attacked by Grim Reaper, which is I guess the brother of Simon Williams Wonder Man, which they're coming out with a show Wonder Man, which is going to be played by I forget the actor's name. Um, but the whole idea is that when Ultron created Vision, I was happy that Tom King actually provided a lot of context for readers who maybe are less familiar jumping in because I was like, all right, what am I going to have to explain on the podcast to maybe delve into a little deeper? But he explained, he goes, oh, yeah, no, Ultron took brainwaves from Simon Williams to create Vision. And so it explained that process a little bit. So that's why Grim Reaper attacks them at the start of the book and goes, this is just continuing to rob my brother's mind and everything. And so, but getting back to like, the brainwaves of Scarlet being what leads to the creation of Virginia. So she kills Grim Reaper because she kind of loses control and attacks him too harshly. Um, she then, goes to attack a guy who's blackmailing her. And that was a chilling issue to read. I will say, when it first started happening, because the whole thing is that the kid's going down the stairs because he hears like an argument happening between his dad and Virginia, and I was just kind of like, oh, okay, so is this going to go the route of, she's going to attack him and she's going to kill him, and then the son's going to see, so it's like that moral dilemma of do I have to take out the witness type
Mhm.
deal. And then as I was getting closer in the dialogue, I went, wait, she can phase and things can go through her. He has a gun on her. Please don't tell me this is going to go the extra dark route. And then it went the extra dark route.
I didn't expect that either. My jaw just dropped when I read that. And I also like I know that we had the killing of the Grim Reaper earlier, like I think an issue or two before then, and I still was not prepared. Where I was like,
Yeah.
this child is getting shot. This is wait, what? Like this happens in this world? I thought, oh, like a suburban family, like as you said, a TV-14 kind of thing, and this was not TV-14. It
Yeah.
wasn't.
That was probably the most mature part of the book, in my opinion, especially because you see him lifeless and everything. I was like, oh my God. Was not expecting that one. But hey, at least the dog came back. At least Sparky was able to be repaired in the end.
Nice. I do feel bad about those neighbors though, who were
Nora and
yeah,
George.
because of Victor, the brother.
Yeah.
Um, and it was their dog, right?
Yeah, so their dog, got out of the house, dug up the
Yeah.
body that was in the backyard because Virginia buries Grim Reaper in their backyard, and the dog got to it, but then it touched Grim Reaper's weapon that was buried and got shocked. And so I guess the dog dies from the shock, and then Vision's like, all right, well, I'll copy the dog's brainwaves to give my kids a dog.
Oh, so those poor neighbors lost their
Yeah.
dog and their home and their lives. Like that was another dark part. I know it didn't really go into it too much in the comic, but when I sat down and I thought about it, I was like, these like, wait, what? Why is there not more going into this fire and
hmm
more neighbors reacting to this? Because I feel like it didn't really like touch on that after the fire.
Well, yeah, I know. It was just kind of like, all right, I guess. But I feel like that was the catalyst for the Avengers putting them on basically house arrest, being like, you need to sit here while we figure out everything going on. Because what I thought was really well done, especially getting into like the Tom King and how he like ties things back together. In that first issue, they say like, it has that horror sci-fi feel where so the first half of the book is narrated by Agatha Harkness, who in comics is more of like an older woman, for most of it.
And I
Um,
know her as Agatha all along
yes.
in
Yeah,
WandaVision.
no, only recently in comics did they like age her down to match the MCU. But so the first half is told from her perspective, and it's like this tale of warning that Vision's gonna snap because of this family he's created. Because there's like seeing the future and this and that. And then the second half is told by Scarlet Witch, kind of like saying the other side of the story and how things play out more and what's the path forward. And but in that first issue, they have the whole yeah, so George and Nora, they met the Visions, they brought them cookies. Too bad that, one day their house is going to get burned down by one of the Visions, and that'll be the end of them. And it's like, oh, that was in issue one. And then it's like, okay, so what? Is one of the Visions going to take like a Molotov cocktail to their house or something? Like, and then the way they play it out, where the son gets attacked by, I think, not Chase, that was the other person, the Runaways, Victor, right? I
Yeah,
think.
Victor.
Yeah, because Victor, so context on Victor, Victor is a member of the Runaways. And so that's like another team. They made a Hulu show based on that comic where the Runaways are a group of runaway teenagers where all of their parents were villains. So they ran away to just get away from them and then they kind of like help out where they can. Um, and so he attacked the sun because he was sent there by the Avengers after all the bodies piling up at the Vision's house. Um, and so yeah, while attacking the sun, he blasts the ray. I went, oh, so that's how the house burns down. Got it.
I had that same thought too. And then something else that I want to admire about the writing was there would be these like little like side details that were sometimes thrown in here and there that I think with certain scenes, like for example, like getting into like the fire a little bit more. They had that dialogue a few issues earlier where they were like, oh, and her and Nora's last thought is gonna be this, and George's last thought is gonna be that. So when that scene happened, I had those details in the back of my mind. So even though those characters, George and Nora, were not in the actual scene, I feel like that scene had their presence a little bit. So yeah, I really admire the writing in this.
So what did you maybe not like about the series? What was maybe a dislike for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that for me, a dislike is, and this is probably just like the nature of comics being 22 pages, but there were just things I wanted more of. So I wanted more of Vision's son as a character separate from what's happening with his family. I wanted a little bit more of like neighbor interaction as the story went on. I understand why it didn't happen because like they had established it well, but I feel like that thread kind of got lost a little bit, but it paid off because, at the end, as you said, the Avengers put them on house arrest. Um, I didn't expect it to be as bloody like we talked about. That's not really something I dislike, because I feel like every scene where it happened, it was necessary for the plot. It wasn't like it was like a completely out of the blue kind of thing. Um, but that's just not usually my taste and like what I read. But truthfully, this is most shocking to me, but I don't really have many things that I dislike about this. And again, like this is my first comic book series, so I didn't really know what to expect, and I'm not somebody who finds myself drawn to comics, but what I'm drawn to is great storytelling in any medium. So I don't love every TV show or film that I watch, but I still love TV shows and films. So I think this would be a series that I would always appreciate, even as I explore other comics in my life. If I don't love other comics, I definitely love this one.
Yeah, no, it was really well put together. It was phenomenal. And it's like especially knowing that after this book, Tom King goes to DC and he hasn't really done a lot of Marvel work since because now I think he signed an exclusive contract with DC, so he mainly writes over there now. Like I would love to see him on other Marvel characters if he has this level of like attention to detail and history with them. Because like Vision isn't your Iron Man, he's not your Captain America, it's not like the biggest character, but like with this story, he really stands out and gets so much growth and like depth to him. And they even do, in that sci-fi horror spirit, they even do like the little twist ending like when you're watching like an old school horror movie like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, where it's like, did that ending actually happen? Where it's like one of the characters just kind of gets attacked and then it's never brought up again. They do that in this book, although I assume comes up in later comics where, it looks like, okay, so now since Vin has died, Virginia killed Victor in revenge for killing um, Vin and also did it so that Vision wouldn't snap and kill Victor and become this, like you said, self-fulfilling prophecy of like becoming a monster that everyone should fear. Now it's just Vision raising uh Viv? Yeah, Viv on his own. And while she goes off to school, and she has that really great closing dialogue that you kind of alluded to earlier with the whole Dad, I'm never going to be normal. My mom is dead because she did A, B, and C. My brother's dead because our cyborg, robot uncle killed him. Never going to be normal. We just kind of have to roll with it and accept it. And it's like, okay, well, have a good day at school. And then he goes back into the house, and then the final page is I think, has Vin like still he's working on him to try and revive him. And it's kind of this horror-esque ending where he's singing the song that Virginia would sing while she's glitching out, row row your boat. And it's like, shh, we're working on it. And I was like, oh my God, that's a chilling ending to
Yeah,
end on for this.
that's a good point. I think with the Vision character, the theme of grief is explored really well. And like what I've seen so far in WandaVision and in this series, like I'm as you mentioned that, I was thinking about the scene where after Vin died, Vision goes to his room alone. He pops out one of his eyeballs, and then just like he projects onto the wall all these memories with Vin, and in particular, the one memory of Vin wanting to show him something, and Vision being like, I have a call with the Avengers, like, I don't have time for this. And he has all of this regret. And, I have had people close to me who have lost loved ones, and like that type of grief, it stays with you your whole life. It affects all of your choices, and I feel like this ending of the comic, it did a good job of showing how that grief does stay with you. And I'm going to go back to my favorite WandaVision quote of all time: what is grief if not love persisting? And I feel like that really sums up Vision's story really well, because he has so much grief from different areas of his life. So, like his how he came into the world, how he was built to destroy the Avengers. He doesn't have a relationship with his father, and then, like that grief of losing Wanda, and now this grief of losing the family that he built and wanting to hold on to whatever he can. I feel like I'm gonna cry. I'm like, oh, Vision, I feel your heart in this. And I think that's again like what drew me to this is his complex emotions.
Yeah, for an android. And
Yeah.
with you bringing up the eye projection and everything, like that's kind of again getting into the this is a regular family, but it's the Android like version of it. That's kind of like, listening to like old voicemails of a loved one that like, just to hear or see them again, but instead he takes out his eye and is projecting the scene onto the room. Like I really appreciated all of those details.
Yeah, I feel like all those details really like humanized him, even though he's an android. So I think Vision might be one of the most relatable characters to me, even though he's not a human.
Hmm.
But he's great.
Well, that's why one moment of the book that really got to me, not got to me like, I was upset or anything, but just something to think about is the whole one of the ideas in the book is they have the flowers that if you eat a petal, you can see the future, but the way the process actually has to work is something has to eat the petal and then you have to kill that thing and eat the petal after taking it out of their stomach. Gross. Um, but and that's why Agatha does it to see the future about Vision and warn the Avengers, hey, this guy could snap if anything really happens with his family. Um, but they have a bit of this concept of like what is life, what is the soul? Vision, his daughter tries praying at one point and is like, I don't know if I really believe in God, so I'm praying that there is a God. I'm praying that, our brother had a soul, even though he was an android, because I don't think he could have one. And then I'm praying that his soul is at rest after he's dead. And so they have like a lot of these concepts of like, what is life, if it's synthetic. And at the end of the book, um, Virginia kills their synthetic dog because it had ate a petal so that she could eat the petal and see the future. And you kind of have, I had that thought of, okay, well, if this is magic and we're talking about, it has to be eaten by maybe a living thing, would that technically mean that the synthetic life is life and everything? And it got a little deep for me because I'm like, if she was able to see the future from that, that would imply a soul, that would imply life. So I thought I don't know how I got on this train of thought and went down the rabbit hole just now, but that was something that really stood out to me. I was like, okay, we're getting really deep on this one.
Yeah, no, that scene of them praying and everything that you just mentioned with the flower, it got me thinking too, where it's like, how do you like define what is living? And I think in this age of, like I think part of why the story hits is we're in this increasing like technological age where especially with like AI just being used all the time now, it feels like. I remember in the early days of AI, I had a friend who was like trying it out, and he wrote into AI and was like, "Oh, I have a date later and I have a pimple and I'm feeling really bad about it." And then AI was like, "I've struggled with acne too." And we're like, Wait, what? Like AI has feelings? So, it definitely does bring a lot of questions about like life, humanizing our technology. Is this real? Sometimes it feels real. So I'm glad that you called that out, 'cause I think that's a good point about this series.
Yeah, because AI scares me. I don't like AI. Especially you in the TV realm, like whenever I hear like, oh, I use AI, I use ChatGPT, I always think of like, I'm like, we had strikes for a reason.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't like AI. I don't use it, and like I'll have all these coworkers that are like, oh, ChatGPT, I just ChatGPT it. It's the greatest thing ever. I'm like, but
It's
there's
definitely it's making jobs easier, but it's also taking away jobs. And also something people don't talk about enough is that AI is actually really bad for the environment because of like how
the
much,
servers, right?
yeah, and like how much like power it uses. And in a world where our planet is burning, it's just not great to be so reliant on AI. So, yeah, I definitely was comparing it to like my own experiences. And like you had mentioned, like being in TV. And that was because I think for me, the rise of AI had been like kind of under the radar until the strikes last year, or actually not
Hmm.
even last year, 2023 now, because we're in 2025. So the strikes about a year and a half ago. And it really got me thinking about the way technology does affect everything. And just to apply that to vision, like imagine if we like lived in a world where AI could create their own like family and friends, and like I would like to think that it wouldn't be a threat, but I can understand the perspective of, Vision's neighbors and people in the government with the Avengers, like not being so accepting of them.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the arguments in this book hit for me. Like, I thought the principal and the dad who's like blackmailing Virginia, like they had some valid points of the, just so you know, your son did choke out one of our students, which like that's not good, but took like they took such a rude and just like narrow-minded way of talking about it, where like the principal calls Viv and Vin weapons. He goes, "You're just laying weapons into my school." And they're like, "Well, hold on, they're kids. Like, calm down." I understand the perspective of they have the power to be destructive and everything, but you're not giving them a chance right now. And then with the dad, like he wasn't having a conversation with Virginia of like, listen, your son attacked my son. He just kept calling her children things. And it
Mhm.
was like, maybe don't do that. Yeah,
It's
it got
true.
into some really like touchy language there. I'm like, I don't think you're quite getting the point here.
Yeah. And of course, like reading that, as I mentioned earlier, I know that you haven't seen Wicked, but I
I
really,
saw the last 60 seconds as I was waiting to get into Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
oh, okay. So you saw the scene of the Green Witch flying through the sky and singing,
Yeah, I saw that one, the iconic song that nobody can escape.
defying gravity, holding
Yeah.
space for defying gravity.
Yeah.
So that scene also got me thinking about the character of Elphaba. And I know this comparison is not relevant to you, but maybe to some listener out there who has seen Wicked, they can understand where I'm going with this. But of people othering you, of people not thinking that your humanity is valid. And then it's like, okay, like I see the arguments of this book, but then if I take what's happening and I put it in real life with real technology, that argument kind of falls apart a little bit. So, yeah, I love how complex this world is and all of those themes of like what is life? Like what deserves to be regarded this way? That all comes through really well in this.
Yeah, even with like Vision's parenting, because like the other scene I thought was like really strong in this book is when Vision's trying to repair Viv after she was attacked by the Grim Reaper, and Iron Man's helping him, Tony's helping him,
Yeah.
and at the time he goes, just so you know, this is going to be a lot of power. Like we might wipe out the power grid on this one, and it's probably going to hurt you if you don't turn things off. And Vision goes, well, I have to leave them on so that I can do this properly. And then it's like hurting him and they're using a lot of power. So Tony goes, we have to stop. And Vision has that whole like speech where like just kind of like as a protective father doing the whole Tony, you are a fellow Avenger. You are one of my oldest friends. But if you stop this, I will kill you. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that with the What Is Life and everything, and just the family dynamics through an Android lens, I thought was just incredible. What would you rate the book out of 10?
Oh, good question. I would say 9.5 out of 10, which is
Ooh,
very
what gives
high.
it the minus point five?
I would say the minus point 0.5 is that there are just more things I wish it went into. So that's just a personal preference. It has like nothing to do with the objective take on how the book is structured and the story and all of that. What would you rate it as the comic book expert here?
Oh, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah?
This
Okay.
was phenomenal, and I'm looking it up because I wonder, did it win? I believe this book, so there in comics, there's like the what you call it, the Eisners, which is almost like the Oscars, but for comics. And there is in 2017, The Vision, so this series won the Eisner for best limited series or story arc. So like this was even regarded at the time as like this is something special, and especially reading it after the fact there wasn't, giant battle every issue. It wasn't like your Avengers thing where we have to stop the villain. This was just a story about family, about, a lot of theoretical or not theoretical, philosophical topics and everything. I just really dug it. And like I said, the dialogue is what really made it for me with like how the conversations were happening, how they're interacting. They're trying to be a normal family. So like they're going to a restaurant, but they don't eat food so they're like, just we'll pay for what the food would have cost. We just want to like have the experience of sitting in a restaurant for 45 minutes eating with each other. And then they can't have family dinner, so they'll do family conversation where it's their dinner and they talk about what they learned during the day and everything. I just thought all of it was so interesting.
I know, I really loved that. I'm glad that you brought up that restaurant scene because it was one of those like laugh out loud funny moments for me where like the waiter's like, "Are you sure? Like our chef wants to know if he can just bring out the food you ordered." And he's like, "No, just come back in 45 minutes and bring us the bill. We'll pay." And then all the other people in the restaurant are looking at them like, "What?"
Yeah, there was one guy like in the right of the panel where he just has like his fork in his mouth and he's like
It was really funny. And it's good to know that it won that honor. I think it's so well deserved. Like the dialogue was really stand out. I think the biggest compliment that I can give it as somebody who works in TV is I would love to adapt this into a series. I know that WandaVision was inspired by it, but not an inspiration, like an actual series of this, because I think that those themes are so relatable and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it because comics are not something that I normally gravitate towards.
Well, if you like the Vision, I know they are working on a Vision project as kind of like a continuation from WandaVision, because the whole thing with Vision turning white, and they talk about it a little bit in this book, is that was a time that they had to repair the Vision, but he was then absent of like his emotions and everything. Like he was more robotic than he was previously. And so that's where he really drifts apart from Scarlet Witch, etc. And so they've now done that in live action where he's more machine than he was, you know, spiritual synthetic human type deal when he had the Mind Stone. And so they're gonna apparently, according to reports and everything, they're working on a Vision project. James Spader is apparently returning to voice Ultron.
Oh,
So there's something coming out in the future that you may want to keep your eye out for. I don't
yeah.
know when it's happening because there's been like no official release window or word on it, and Marvel's kind of moved a lot of things around. But yeah, I know that's in the works.
I'm excited to hear that. I'll definitely
Yeah.
be watching. Like maybe there's other Marvel characters I should explore. Do you have any recommendation?
Ooh, recommendations for Marvel characters, Daredevil.
Daredevil.
That's the number one. A really phenomenal run to check out. That so there are some books that I always recommend as like if you want to dip your toe into comics and read something really good, read this. So like the first arc of Nightwing by Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo, the one you picked up, Leaping into the Light, that's one I think is a great one to like jump in. It's a nice inspiring story. It kind of introduces you to Nightwing and like this new dynamic where he's reconnecting with Barbara. He has adopted a dog. It's a new chapter in his life. I feel like that's a great jumping on point for if you want to get into like a comic series. The other one I usually recommend on the Marvel side is Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto. The artwork is breathtaking. It's incredible. And the first arc of that, if you wanted, could just be like you read the first 5 issues and you're done. But if you keep going, you'll get more of the story. And what was really special about that run, that's one of like the early runs I read. And it really delves into it's a lot less of the superheroing. A lot of the early issues after the first 5 are Matt just kind of like going through life and trying to like make a difference without being a superhero. And it does a really like it was phenomenal for like the first 25 issues. And then it kind of gets a little all over the place because it had to tie into like some events and everything. But Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky is one I'd recommend. The other one that I love, but you kind of have to read everything to get the scope, is Venom by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman. Because a big thing with that story, it's 35 issues, but then there were 2 events that tied in. There was Absolute Carnage and King in Black. And it's this story that really propelled Venom to being like a hero. Like he no longer an anti-hero, like he is a hero who saves the world and everything. Because he has to deal with this multiverse world-ending threat. But while all this is going on, you get the personal, you know, problems and issues where he discovers spoiler alert, that he is a father, and so now he's kind of dealing with, a child he didn't know he had and what it means to be a father. Like, and he's new at it after, he spent years just trying to kill Spider-Man because he hated him. So those are the ones I'd recommend on the Marvel side. Those are like really good ones to jump in.
I love how deep that story gets. I feel like you could honestly take a plot in like some dramatic TV show or some soap opera and comic bookify it and have it actually work in a
They
way.
so Marvel does that a bit. Because like, a lot of the times they make comics and they adapt it to TV or movies. So like Invincible, it's a comic series, but now it's a cartoon on Amazon Prime. And I honestly love when they do animation for adaptation because you can really adapt it more accurately than like the MCU, where you're drawing more inspiration than complete adaptation. Like Secret Invasion gets a lot of flack in the MCU because it wasn't the best show, but also it called itself Secret Invasion, but really did not pull anything from the comic Secret Invasion. But Marvel, what they'll do, I guess, to make their Disney Plus series and stuff a little more accessible, is they will, mostly for Star Wars, they will make the show for like Ahsoka or The Mandalorian, and then because Disney owns Marvel, they will take like season 1 and turn it into a comic series, so that I guess if you didn't watch the show, you could pick up the comic and still get the story. But I don't think they do that often with like the reverse, where it's live action or television to comics.
I froze for a second, but I think I heard Patience Zoom. No, that's great to know. And I agree. I definitely think there's more that you can do with animation. I was trying to think as I was reading this, like, why wasn't this comic adapted more in this world? Like, why was it more of an inspired by thing? And I definitely see how with certain like in real life adaptations, it makes more sense to change certain things around. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad we got to chat. What other comics are you reading right now? Actually, no, scratch that. What is your favorite comic of all time? I need
Favorite
to know.
comic of all time? Oof, that would have to be, honestly, if I'm going off recency and what's at the top of my head, Venom by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman. That's
Wow.
just such a good story, and that's why, again, getting into the adaptation thing, the recent Venom movie, Venom: The Last Dance, tried to incorporate some of that storytelling, and it was just horribly done. And so, especially when you read something like so impactful like that, and then you just kind of see it like eviscerated a little bit in live action adaptation, you're like, like I'm sure you've had that with like, what's like a book that you've read that you saw it adapted and you went, Ooh.
Yeah. I would say there's a lot. I'm trying to think. I usually do tend to look more favorably on the adaptation, but I'll say one that I read last year was the book One Day. It had a Netflix series and it also had a movie that had come out a few years prior with Anne Hathaway. And I think for me, like with the movie, I didn't 100% love it, but with the series, I was like, yes, they got it right. This is great. So yeah, with adaptations, it's not always 100%. Did I freeze again?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Zoom is freaking me out right now.
But yeah, any other
Yeah.
thoughts on Vision or in general?
Um, Vision deserves love and delicate care. He's been through a lot. I think for me the ending really stuck with me, which like I've mentioned a couple times, but Virginia being so self-sacrificing in the end, her, like of course Vision has the instinct to protect his family, and Virginia knows that he's somebody who has saved the world 37 times and his reputation is really important to him. And she doesn't want him to ruin that, especially for her own mistakes and her not confiding in him earlier. So, I think for me, like their ending was very beautiful of her being like, "No, I want to protect your integrity. Like I'm leaving now." It also made me very sad though to think about his daughter growing up without his mother and then also how his mother confessed to her role in the killing of I think the character was CK.
CK was the kid, yeah.
Yeah, so her confessing that to her daughter, yeah, something I really loved was like I can see this type of story playing out in different mediums. Like I could see, somebody confessing something before they die. Like that could happen in a drama, that could happen in a comedy, that could happen in a movie, that could happen in a book. So I think getting to experience that dramatic plot line as a comic, seeing how that works, it gave me a lot more respect for the medium, I think. Where because I think going into it, maybe I had certain like stereotypes of what a comic would be. So I thought it would be very like heavy on their powers and like all the intricate technology. So I was pleasantly surprised when it didn't lean into that as heavily as I thought it would. It was just it had a story that had a heart and it everything that all of the powers that they went into, everything that it did all tied back into that story. What are your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are that it was awesome. I loved it. I definitely want to check out. So I read some other Tom King stories, but I definitely want to read more of his work. I actually haven't like fully read his Batman run, so I do want to like dive more into his stuff after I finish like Invincible and the other things I'm reading right now. But yeah, it was just so good. I loved it.
Yay, I'm so glad to hear that. What is next for you in terms of what you're reading for the show?
We got a few things on the list that will be revealed
Mm,
at another time, which
can't wait.
that's probably the perfect time to ominously like leave that hanging and do the outro script. So, thank you once again for visiting your local comic shop. If you like today's discussion, please feel free to check out other episodes we've done. All episodes of the podcast are available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud, with new episodes dropping every Monday at midnight. Please feel free to subscribe to the show and my socials at Local Comic Sean for clips, what we're reading in the future. So, Guneet, it'll be there. And more fun. If you'd like to support the show, I encourage you to subscribe to our Patreon to gain access to behind the scenes content and other resources for both reading and digital creation. Thank you so much for visiting, and I'll see you the next time. Any outro words?
Thanks so much for having me on. As a somebody who's new to comics, I feel like I learned a lot from hearing you talk about it. It's great to see you so passionate, and congrats on relaunching the show. I'm so excited for you, and I am recording this with you before the first episode drops, so I can't wait to listen to the first episode on Monday. Congrats.
Thanks. All right. And with that, we say goodbye to the listener.
Bye.
Bye.